What's going on YouTube? So, if you haven't seen my short that I did last week, um, I am officially going to be opening a brick and mortar store. It's still going to be a little bit, there's still some work that needs to get done. However, the lease has been fully signed, executed, and we are moving from online only to a physical retail location. With that being said, one thing I noticed when I was looking at a lot of videos, nobody really kind of talked about in detail about the evaluation of how they kind of determined the place they ended up at, much less kind of how they navigated right getting a lease signed for it, right? So that's kind of what I'm just going to talk about today. Obviously, I can't go into like super detail about the lease because there's confidentiality agreements, but I will kind of talk about some of the principles that I used when negotiating it and some of the things that you should probably have in yours to protect your business. If that's something that you're looking to go into and go brick and mortar, hopefully you'll find this real helpful because I had a hard time finding a lot of information out about this. Um, okay, so a lot of people think that, okay, forgive me, I have a lot of notes here, so I'm going to be using those because there's a lot of stuff here I wanted to go over. Um, a lot of people think that it's just, getting the lowest rent you can and boom, sign, right? And it wasn't really till I kind of started looking at a lot of this stuff and researching it that I realized actually rent was like just a tiny portion. Not saying it wasn't important, but there were so many other things besides rent that I would argue is probably a little more critical to think about, right? So you have to have the right mindset. Okay, so don't think about the business you have today, but the business you want to have 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, right? And you'll see what I mean by that, right? So first of all, obviously you need to evaluate location, right? So you have a lot of locations where, yeah, maybe the rent is lower here, but you're kind of out of the way. It's going to be hard to get foot traffic. Here's a location over here, and it has really, really high rent, but you have a lot of good foot traffic, right? So you can't just look at rent. And when you're looking at location, for me, there were important things that I wanted to make sure I was considering, right? Obviously, I wanted a decent location, a safe location, right? Good visibility. I wanted to make sure that, there's other neighboring businesses that would help kind of draw the right kind of traffic in, right? Because not all traffic is going to be equally valuable to your business, depending on what's around you, right? Obviously, as a card shop, I want to have events and pre-release and trade nights and things like that. So available parking is something that I need to evaluate properly, right? Is there somewhere where I can have shipments be delivered to me in inventory, right? Is there somewhere where that's going to be able for delivery access, right? So every location is going to have its trade-off. I looked at so many locations, and this location was like, oh man, this would be perfect for this, but dang it, it doesn't have this. Or this location over here, this would be perfect because it has this, that, and the other, but then, oh man, it didn't really quite have this or that. Shucks, right? Um, there was never really any location where I was like, this is perfect on everything. Not to say that I'm unhappy with the location that I got, right? I love it. It's why I went with this one. But just know there's always going to be, there's going to be some give and take. So just understand that, right? Um, so what I can tell you, I don't want to give the address yet because there's still a lot of construction crew not coming in. We negotiated. It used to be a former dance studio, and so when they left, a lot of the artifacts of their studio are still there. So we've asked the landlord to remove a lot of that stuff. So that's what's been happening this week. It's their side of the house kind of clearing things out before I go in and start doing my thing. So I will say it's in Santee. It's not like it's a super secret. It wouldn't take too much work to find the location. But say it's in Santee, and it's right across from the Santee Sports Complex, right? So there's multiple soccer fields, multiple baseball fields, and there's events happening all the time over there, family events, right? And so people are going to be playing those games, those events, and whatnot afterwards. Hopefully, going right across the street. I'm literally right across the street. Um, it'd be like a minute walk. You walk out the parking lot, go to the crosswalk, walk across the street, bam, you're there. Um, so in the shopping center that I'm at, There is a pizza place, a Mexican food restaurant. There's a Thai restaurant, three children's dentistries, a tutor time, and it's anchored by a food for less, right? So there's a lot of traffic coming in that's going to be coming with kids and family, which is exactly the kind of good traffic for a card shop, right? You want families coming in, the kids see it, come in, the parents, that nostalgia hits them. So it's a great location, I believe, and that's one of the big things that I liked about it. There was lots of parking, so yeah, enough about location. Let's talk about rent because I know a lot of people are probably kind of scratching their head about how is rent not important. So let's say your rent is whatever it is, right? And a lot of people think, okay, well, I got to negotiate that down. I need the rent to be as low as possible. How much do you really think you're going to get it down, right? 5, 10, 15%? Not saying that, I did negotiate some off my rent. However, it's not, in my opinion, what's going to make or break your business, right? Say your rent is $3,000 a month. Okay, is 10% off, right? So you'd be doing 2,700. Is $300 a month? Is 10% going to make or break your business, right? If $300 extra a month is going to be what prevents your business from succeeding, I don't think it was the rent that prevented you from succeeding, right? Now, obviously, that's going to be probably highly up for debate, and depending what those amounts are, could be very different. But if the rent alone, if that percentage is going to make or break your ability to be successful, I don't think your business was ready for it in the first place, right? Um, Now let's be clear. For rent, because we're going to get to this, rent's going to be made up of two different things. You have your base rent, which is like how much it costs for you to pay the landlord. That's what the landlord wants. The other half is what a lot of times is going to be called like NNN, right? Triple net. And these are going to be including your different fees, right? It's going to be your taxes. It's going to be common area maintenance, and I'll get in more detail on that. But that's going to be a separate line item, and those two together will form your total monthly rent. Okay, so did I negotiate some off my rent? Yes, but that's not where I put, most of my negotiating power. So, well, I'll get to that. One of the biggest things, right, and this is what I think is going to help protect my business and help me be able to grow. In any business, if you start, right, if you've started one already or you're thinking about starting one, would you honestly be able to say to yourself, if you haven't started one, that the revenue you make in year one is going to be the same in year two? Or are you going to be growing? Right? Same if for those of you that have already started a business, right? If you haven't been a full year or whatnot, it doesn't matter, right? Just think about month by month then. Is your revenue growing? With that being said, so think about it, right? If you're obsessing over the rent right now because the 10% is going to make that big of a difference to you, are you expecting that your revenue and profit is going to be the same in year two, in year three, year four, year five? Right? If the answer is yes, your business model isn't correct. So, what I mean by protect your business in this case was ramp time. What do I mean by that? So, like I mentioned, there's some artifacts from the dance studio that they're going to be removing. After that point, it turns over to me, and I'm going to start doing what I have to do. I was able to negotiate a certain amount of time that I have, um, to take care of those things, right? And I don't want to get into the specific numbers and how we negotiated, but let's just say that it's going to be very, very cheap for me to have this time to do what I need to do, right? Now, there's a couple schools of thought here, right? You can, everything's a balancing act, right? So there's what you want and what the landlord wants. So sure, maybe you can ask for some money to fund the build outs that you want, but then they're going to want to know, okay, well, what is it you're going to be doing with that money if I give you any, right? And how much are you asking for? Because if you're asking more from this side, then from their side, they're going to be able to give you less than anything else. Versus you say, okay, maybe I want less a TI, tenant improvement funds, and then more ramp time, right? And ramp time essentially, um, like rent abatement, right? So that way you can start operating without having that overhead for a certain period of time that you negotiate. That way you can preserve that cash and kind of do what you need to do, right? So in my case, I opted for asking for very little on the upfront side in exchange for some ramp time because basically, I'll be taking a business loan. That money will be used to kind of fund the remodel and things like that, and then I can start operating and have a lot of leeway and breathing room. I won't say for how long, but let's just say that I feel like I got a pretty good amount of time to ramp my business up without having a whole lot of pressure over me. Okay. Eventually, the overhead will hit, right? But by then, I will have had some time to kind of get things moving, right? I would say the first year of your business is probably the most crucial because that's when you're trying to build all these systems, get your presence out there, get people coming in, figure out how to run events, get those judges and things going, get the attendance running. So yeah, your revenue for year one will not and should not be the same as year two. So protecting your cash flow in that first year, I think, is very important. I would argue probably most businesses are going to make or break that first year. Maybe they'll maybe limp on beyond that, but if they weren't real successful within that first year, I don't really see them being successful in year two. So for me, making sure that I had as much chance in the beginning to be successful as possible was of utmost importance. Because if you could make it that first year, for year two, your revenue should be bigger. Year three, your revenue should probably be bigger. So just kind of think about that rather than always obsessing of oh, the rent, 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 right? Um, okay, so one thing I just want to say, because I had mentioned the N&N fees, some of the things that N&N pays for is insurance of the landlord. You still have to have your own insurance, so just know that's going to be an expense that you have to have, right? You got if someone were to come to your store and they trip and get hurt, your insurance is going to be the one that has to pay out for that. But they still have to have building insurance and whatnot. So your N&N fees are going to take care of insurance, the property taxes, management fees, common area electricity. In my case, I'm responsible for my own um, utility bills, but there are still like exterior lighting, the parking lots and whatnot. So every tenant within that area is going to pay a prorated share of those fees. That makes up your N&N, right? So there's going to be water and sewage, trash removal, landscape maintenance, tree trimming, pressure washing in the parking lots, things like that. So all that together, it's going to make up your N&N. Okay, moving on. Other things that were really important is in the shopping center, right? I am the only one that is business is centered primarily around collectibles and trading cards. Obviously, I would like to keep it that way. You should want to keep it that way. So I found it wasn't really common in any lease agreements for that kind of language to be in there. So draft yourself a I would highly recommend drafting yourself an exclusivity agreement. You don't want another business coming in whose primary business model is going to be selling the exact products that you carry within that same shopping center, right? It just wouldn't be good. And I don't think a landlord would probably do that because it wouldn't benefit them to have two tenants now struggling. But nonetheless, put it in, right? You can always negotiate from there, but put it in. Other things that I think are important is a renewal option, right? So hopefully your business is going to be successful. If it is, you don't want to reach the end of that rope and then like, hey, sorry, we don't want to offer a renewal. We like to get, this business in, or this one asked about us, or whatever the case may be, right? Um, and the next thing you know, you don't have the option if that space has been working really well. Maybe you got bigger and you want to move to a bigger space. Great, right? Maybe you don't want to renew. It's not really working out, whatever the case is. But if it is working out and that space still works for you, having that renewal option is nice. So consider that. Um, like I said, I already talked about the tenant improvements, right? So just know it's a scale, right? So if you're asking more up front, expect less on the back end, and vice versa. For me, I valued the ramp time. Um, uh, okay, so sublease rights. This I looked at as a protection, right? So let me break this in two parts. A landlord, so you have to think like them, right? They're not just looking, okay, I need to find someone who's going to pay the highest rent. Not true. They want somebody whose business model they believe is going to be stable enough that they will be able to generate enough revenue that they can continue paying the rent on, time each month. Is going to be a boon to the overall, because most of these shop owners, they own multiple buildings in whatever shopping center you're buying at. If you're doing a shopping center, not like a standalone building. Um, So they want a business that is going to help bring people there. Okay. If you don't bring additional people there that would interact with other businesses, you're less valuable to them than another kind of business that would. So, with that being said, they're trying to manage risk as well, right? So, most of the time, I don't think I would probably ever see a lease. I never saw a single lease template or anything in which there wasn't some sort of personal guarantee in there of some sort. Right now, that's basically just saying that in the event that your business, because you better have a business license, in the event that your business cannot pay the rent, you as the individual who's signing is going to be personally responsible for guaranteeing that lease. Okay, so in other words, sure, okay, maybe the LLC defaulted or whatever, you still better be paying as the individual. Right, that protects the landlord. Now, it's fair to say, okay, well, what kind of protects me, right? I'm taking a lot of risk here, and that's a fair question. So, one of the things that I would suggest looking into is um, your ability for sublease rights. Okay, so say, and it's not necessarily to say that you think your business is going to fail, but it'd be like a fail safe. Okay, so if you are maybe struggling a little bit, like what, this isn't really working, it's too risky, but I still have another year left. Um, if you have sublease rights, then perhaps you are able to try to find another business that wants to sublease it, right? They pay you for subleasing that space, and you sublease it out to them and pay the owner what they're paying you. Um, Obviously, it's going to be subject to their approval and whatnot, but there's certain language that you can put in there. Again, without getting specific, but just know there is language you can put in there that will make it legally viable for you to have this option, give the owner still their protection, and it gives you kind of like a plan B if God forbid you needed it because your business was struggling a little too much, and you can't just break the lease, right? You're still responsible for paying for it, so that gives you like a fail-safe option. So definitely take a look at that if you're negotiating, and I would say try to get something like that in there. Um, Okay, so let's see here. What else? Okay, so read every line of the lease. There's a lot of things in here, that looks like very boilerplate, but some of it's going to be very important, even if it doesn't seem so in the beginning. So, for example, one of the things for me was obviously being a place where I wanted people to be able to come in and hang out and spend time, right? It needs to be comfortable. If you don't know Santee, it's in Southern California. It's not close to the coast, so it gets very hot. So if people are coming in and you want them to spend time in here, building a model kit or painting a miniature or playing games and hanging out, it needs to be comfortable, which means you need AC. So when I got in the building, one of the questions that I asked them, because most of the time the language will be, all utilities, yada yada, will be in good working order. Well, one of the things that I was concerned with was what's the age of the AC unit and what's the condition of it. So they had someone come out and take a look at it, and without saying specifically what they found or what they're going to do, let's just say it's being taken care of right before I take over the building. And if you don't ask that, you're not going to know. And the next thing you know, you could be coming in and you're like, oh my God, this is a 20-year-old AC unit and it just died on me a few months in, or even a year to your lease, and now that's on you, right? Generally speaking, you're responsible once you take a lease for maintaining the systems within that building. So if I would have gone in and that AC unit went out on me, I'd be responsible for replacing like this $15,000, $20,000, 2.5 ton unit. So think about things like that, right? Because that's something that you have to use when you're negotiating something up front, and you're trying to balance, right? You can't say, okay, well, I want low rent and I want new utilities and I want this, that, and the other, and then expect them to give you any more consideration on ramp time, right? So it's all kind of a balancing act. So that's what I mean by read everything, look into it, because that is a huge expense that you're taking on, right? So if they were to say, well, it's an older unit, we're not going to be replacing it, then that should factor in on your risk side. Say, well, okay, if I'm going to be taking this much risk, then I need a concession on the back end that properly represents the risk I'm taking, right? Because all a negotiation is basically you and the landlord trying to find out an agreement that works for both of you guys and where both of you are protected, right? So if you're taking on a huge amount of risk here, that needs to be reflected on this end, and vice versa, right? If the landlord is going in real hard on X, Y, and Z, then you might not be able to ask for A, B, C, right, on this side of it. So just know, it's a push and pull, um, but be reasonable, right? Don't just ask for something that only benefits you at the expense of them, because then they're not gonna probably want to deal with you. They're not gonna want to negotiate with you, um, and they'll give the spot to somebody else. So, not saying roll over and just take it, but just understand what a negotiation is. It's not just a one-sided thing. Um, okay, so other thing is make sure you have like dates kind of understood for, because one thing that I was getting real jumbled around with, and even the agents, we had to clean up some language, is there was differences between lease execution versus lease commencement date versus early possession date, and when the lease is executed, when does the lease actually start. So I have lease execution date on this time, right? And then I had to structure it and we had to clean language up so that way lease execution, right? Now this is important because once you have a lease execution, you can try to go to your somebody distributors, and some of them may have different requirements, right? Go to your rep and say, look, I'm now brick and mortar. Here's my executed lease. And in the case of one of my distributors, they were like, hey, great, you have the lease. We understand you can't be open yet because you still have work, but we see you have the lease. We see the structure that's happening here. You can start ordering product that was reserved for brick and mortar. I can't sell it online, right? But at least they're starting to get stuff to me, so that way when I do open, I will have some stock that I can put out, right? So again, that goes to cash flow. I'm going to be pouring cash into inventory that I can't yet sell. But once I open the doors, it's going to be great to be able to have lots of stock to make the store look very full and have things on the shelf, right? So again, kind of goes back to cash flow, but also the importance of having that lease execution, right? Now, not every distributor operates by those rules, right? Some of them are saying, okay, well, we need pictures of the signage, we need pictures of the POS system and whatnot. So I can't get those to them yet because we're not at that stage. But just know that there is some benefit in certain cases to say, okay, look, I have an executed lease. And that also goes for the ability to, with some other distributors, to be able to apply open accounts with them if you don't already have one, because now you can say, look, I am moving to brick and mortar. So anyways, so I have lease execution date. From there, uh, the landlord does some of the things that we'd agreed with that they're going to be handling. Once that happens, then it turns over to me as early possession, right? Early possession. I now take it. We've negotiated, a very, I would say it's pretty favorable to me, possession time to do what I need to do at very, very, very low expense to myself, right? So I can go in, I can do my build, I can do my painting and my flooring, get the fixtures in, the lighting, yada, 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 right? From there, once that early possession time ends, then it turns into, what was the language that we use? Like the actual lease beginning, right? So lease begins, and then I have my negotiated ramp up time that I had mentioned earlier, right? So I have quite a ramp of time to get things going, get the business set up, and start having it, do its thing before full rent commencement, economic commencement will fall down on me. So you kind of see like it all kind of comes together to help your business succeed, and don't just look at, okay, rent. It's all about rent. Get the rent as low as possible, because you can have lower rent. Sure, and maybe that's what, if that's what you focus on, but then your AC system goes out, now you got $15,000-$20,000 expense, right? Or sure, you spent all your negotiating capital on getting your rent down 20%. So let's just say you had um, $3,000 um, rent plus N and N. And you're like, cool, okay, well, it was 3,000, it's 2,400. I got 20% off. Let's just say you somehow got 20% off. I doubt you will ever get that much, but say you did, right? So let's just bust a calculator out here. Right, so let's just say $600. Say you did a 3-year loan, or sorry, 3-year lease, right? 36 months. So that's $21,000. So over your entire, actually, correction, let me take that back, because your NNNs are separate. Those are your taxes and insurance, all that kind of thing. So say your rent is 2,000 and those other fees are 1,000, right? If you get 20% off your rent, you're talking about 20% off 2,000. So you're looking at 1,600. So say 1,600, you saved 400 a month on a 3-year lease, right? So you're like, cool, I saved $14,400. You're like, yeah, awesome, right? So if you took $400 off, year one, maybe that is a much bigger difference because your revenue's lower. By year two, it's not as big of a difference. But then that AC unit goes out, and that's $15,000-$20,000 to replace right there. That just wiped out all the savings that you had, right? So of course you could say, well, I mean, if you had them replace it and didn't take the lower rent, then it's kind of a wash anyway. Yeah, but again, it's all about risk. Where do you want to put your negotiation capital at, right? For me, negotiating huge amounts off the rent and utilizing, a higher amount of negotiation capital on that specific point, it wasn't really worth it, right? So I asked for a modest amount and put my efforts on negotiation elsewhere. Now, I'm not saying that you go in and put it on an AC system, right? What I'm trying to impress upon you is look at the system as a whole and what will make your business have the best chance of being successful. That's what you need to be negotiating towards, right? Not just one item here, one item here, dollar, right? Just figure out what ecosystem within this negotiation framework is going to give my business the best chance to survive. And for me, it was, modest amount off the rent, but having ramp time to get things going to protect cash flow during that first year. So that's just how I did it. Um, I think that's probably all, some of the main things that I want to talk about when it came to a lease. Oh, one thing here. I'm sure it's probably boilerplate, but there was language in not just this, but in a lot of um, samples that I have been seeing and whatnot for lease agreements. The idea of continuous operation, right? From the landlord's perspective, they don't want like a dark store, right? They don't want someone coming in operating basically like a storefront, but it's not really open very much. So it's just kind of like not drawing anything in anybody. So there's like continuous operation language where it says, you must operate it, at least so many days a week from these time frames, yada, yada, yada. For those of us in this business, you know that collections, collectors and hobbyists, whatnot, we're not getting up at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning to go to the card shop, right? It's later in the day. Events and tournaments are happening later in the day when people are off, when they have free time. That's when they're able to go out to the trade nights. Um, Afternoon tournaments when you can have crowds of people actually be able to show up and do that kind of thing. So the boilerplate language, I don't know if it was boilerplate, but what they had wasn't really going to work. So I negotiated changes on that, right? So again, just a lot of it just looks kind of boilerplate, but make sure you're really going through everything because there's going to be things. Um, because card shops operate very differently than most retail stores. So a lot of the language that's used doesn't really mesh particularly cleanly with the kind of business that we're trying to operate. So just make sure that when you find those things that could negatively affect you, um, that you can negotiate that before you sign, and then you're kind of stuck into it, right? So, uh, trying to just go through it here, see if there's anything else I really wanted to talk about that I can. I was able to negotiate fixed increases on the rent, so I know exactly for the entirety of my lease, for year 1, year 2, year 3, I will know exactly what my rent increases are going to be and what that number is going to look like each year. So there won't be any surprise for me there. Um, yeah, I think that's about it. So hopefully you guys found that useful. Like I said, I couldn't really find a whole lot of information about people talking about the evaluation and negotiation process for actually getting a retail space. So if you guys have questions about that, please put it down below. I will answer as honestly as I can. Like I said, obviously there's confidentiality agreements here, but I will talk about it as much as I can, answer the questions. Um, Other than that, I will be doing more content about how I get the place set up. Like I said, right now the landlord, they're doing their thing, so I'm not really in there yet. Once they finish and hand off to me for my early possession period, that's when I take full possession of the building and can start doing my thing. So then I will definitely be kind of documenting all the steps uh, as that happens. So look forward to that. And with that being said, check out epiclootcollectibles.com, buy my stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.